Before we start, just to let you guys know, we are going to be hearing HB 926 first. So if there are anybody outside or in here, if you guys want to give them seats or have a place for them. Thank you. Whew. 926, okay. 2, 3. Yeah, I'm going to. I always do. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. This is the Judiciary Non-Civil Subcommittee. I'm going to ask Vice Chair Reeves to open us up in a prayer, please.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, forgive me for recycling a prayer from 8 a.m. here in this room, but as I've learned from friends in Gwinnett County, where Chair Lady Hong and Representative McGall and I are from, we pray that you will give us the faith of Abraham, the courage of David, and the wisdom of Solomon. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you. So we are very tight on time because we have to go back on the to the floor at 2:30, I believe. So we're going to go ahead and try to do this as efficient as possible. But just to know, we may not get to all of the bills today. We're going to go ahead and get started with HB 926. That's the first bill that we will hear, and that is Vice Chair Reeves. Do you want to stay there and present, or?
Why don't we come up
Okay.
invite Representative Maynard to join me up there also.
Sure.
Chair Lady Hong, thank you so much. Proud to present House Bill 926, the Second Chance Workforce Act of 2024 with Representative Maynard. Vice Chair Houston Gaines asked me to work on the driver's license issue portion of this bill. And when he brought that up, I let him know that Representative Maynard probably during the 2023 session, if not shortly thereafter, had brought up a great idea about certificates of good conduct for people who've paid their debt to society and are out of the criminal system. And so in talking to Vice Chair Gaines and Representative Maynard, we decided to add these two good ideas together. You have a substitute in front of you, LC 394114S. Representative Maynard, in just a moment, when I finish with the driver's license portion, will address the certificate of good conduct, second chance portion of the bill. But let me just start out by saying I'm working on homestead tax relief, and that had not been adjusted since 1978. And as I looked at 1978, that was a time of record inflation, workforce problems, interest rates, what we're going through now. And in Gwinnett County, that I'm proud to represent, I hear from every sector of the economy: healthcare, law enforcement, small business, larger business, they have serious workforce shortages. I represent Buford Highway from downtown Duluth north, and north in my district, and then particularly south of me, all those small businesses on Buford Highway that a lot of us depend on to keep our cars running and doing other industrial and flex manufacturing and all that, those good blue-collar jobs for working people, hard-working Georgians, they have shortages in healthcare. Restaurants have shortages in healthcare. We have a crisis in healthcare in Georgia. Part of it is people believe in what we're doing here in Georgia, and they're moving here. And then, business is good, and we need healthcare or workforce improvement. So this bill is designed to give people a fair shot at getting to work by having a driver's license, and also by getting in the door to be able to interview for a job if they have put behind troubles in their past. So again, I'm going to let Representative Maynor go through the certificate of good conduct, but for those who don't have the substitute in front of you, I'll go ahead and cover that and let her explain the rationale behind the certificates of good conduct. We, based on some feedback, good feedback from folks in law enforcement, this sub says 1 year rather than 6 months, 1 year after somebody has completed their sentence, along with any probation, as long as they don't have a conviction for a sex crime, for a physical violence incident, for felony drug dealing, or for gang activity. As long as they don't have one of those things in their past, they can petition Superior Court for a certificate of good conduct, which Representative Maynor will talk more about later. So I'll address the driver's license part of the bill, which is Section 3 and following. And what we did in the driver's license portion of the bill is we talked to municipal court judges, low-level offenses. These are not child support or DUI or reckless driving. These are kind of low-level citations that you see in Duluth Municipal Court, Suwannee Municipal Court, Sugar Hill Municipal Court, and other misdemeanor level citations. If somebody goofs up and they get their court date wrong or something like that, there's a mechanism here where they and the judge and the court can get the hearing reset, and they can be able to keep their driver's license and not have months without their driver's license. Because in Metro Atlanta, 5 million people, 285, 85, 75, all the roads we've got, if somebody loses their driver's license, it is a huge hardship on getting to and from work. It's a barrier to employment. So we have cleaned up the system of petitioning to get your driver's license back. There were we got some feedback from Miss Leslie at DDS, who I appreciate weighing in. We had originally said, let's waive the reinstatement fee, which is $90 to $100. And she gave the price tag on that, and we said, well, we're going to take that out. We don't want this to become a budget bill and things like that. She also said there were some notices to DDS in the original version of the bill online that every time you send a notice to DDS, you increase the chance there might be some mistaken revocation of a license. So we basically reduced the number of notices to give clarity to the staff at DDS. We did leave in one thing that I think is compassionate. I think it gives a return on the investment. I think is appropriate. Right now, state law says if you file a pauper's affidavit, if you give good evidence that you were below the poverty level, you can get a 50% reduction in your one of your fees. And so we propose in this bill, go ahead and just have that waived if somebody has filed a pauper's affidavit and they qualify for that. Instead of leaving them with a bill for $100 or $200 or $300 rather than $600 or whatever, let's waive that fee and get them back to work, get their driver's license there, because they'll be paying taxes and otherwise supporting the economy in a productive way. So these are some cleanup things. We consulted municipal court judges. We spent a ton of time after the last session this summer and fall spreading the word on this and trying to get input. So before you is a good bill on the driver's license part, and I would turn it over to Representative Maynor to talk a little bit more about certificates of good conduct.
Representative Reeves, can I just ask you a
Sure.
quick clarification question? So we're talking about currently, if you fail to appear for a traffic citation, then whatever the reason being, your license will be suspended. And this basically prevents that. What happens, and then do they get a new court date? And what if they do not appear for that one?
This gives a mechanism, rather than for the court to just revoke and then like 3 or 4 months later you get your license back. This gives a more prompt system for you to work with the court and explain and then get that driver's license. It expedites that process. Right now, we've heard from municipal court judges, some large, some small, that if somebody triggers that notice or whatever, it's a cumbersome process to straighten that out. This makes it simpler. It gives more common sense and more economy and a faster process for somebody to say, I screwed up, missed my court date, whether they were, we got 5 members out of 180 out sick today, I heard. So if somebody's sick and they miss their court date and they approach the court promptly and proactively and responsibly address the issue, it lets them get their license back quicker rather than sitting out of work for 2 or 3 months because they don't have their driver's license. Or, God forbid, driving around Atlanta without a driver's license, probably not insurance either or something like that. So this lets people help themselves by being fully licensed and in compliance and take responsibility.
All right, thank you. Representative Maynor, welcome to Judiciary.
Thank you, Chairwoman, for allowing us to present this bill to you today in the committee. Thank you all for listening, and thank you, thank you, Rep. Reeves, for working with me on this. This bill really has 2 folds to it. If you think about where we are from a practical standpoint, where is Georgia right now? Right now, Georgia has a workforce shortage, and we need to get people to work. We can get people to work 2 ways in this bill. One, if there is a failure to appear, instead of someone's license being suspended or revoked immediately, even though they did not perform the law and go to court when they were supposed to, we are acknowledging that that is still not what they should be doing, but we do need them to get to work. People that go to work are tax-paying citizens. The second piece to that, this bill helps approximately 4 million people right now that have been, they have violated crimes, Georgia law crimes, and they are having trouble getting work. They're having trouble getting housing. They're having trouble getting employment. I had a town hall in my district. Young man, Georgia State University student in computer science. He's been to prison. He stood up in front of a room full of people in the church and told about his story, how he cannot get housing because of his previous record. He went to one apartment building. He paid approximately $300 for the administration fee plus a deposit. They denied him. He goes to another apartment building. He tells them ahead of time, hey, I have a record. Is this going to prevent me from getting this house? They say no. He pays it. They come back and they say, you don't qualify because you have a record. So then he says, okay, well, maybe it's just the city of Atlanta. So let me move outside of the city of Atlanta. Even though I'm a Georgia State University 4.0 student in computer science, let me move outside of the city of Atlanta and try this again somewhere else. He tells the leasing agency the exact same thing again. I have a record. I applied for housing twice before. They denied me. Is my record going to show anything? Here's my transcript. I have a letter from my professor that says I'm a great student. They say, oh, you'll be fine. He pays approximately another $300. So at this point now, this young man is out of approximately $1,000. They still deny him. And he was almost in tears because he said, I am a grown man and I have to live at home with my mom because of my previous record. So this is just a personal story that I'm trying to tell you. The type of person that this would help. The second piece to this is after this bill was dropped, we received numerous calls from people in support of it, including the Georgia Manufacturing Association. There are some things in it that they will testify to that they wish it wasn't a year. They wish it was, back to the 6 months. But we have a need to get these 4 million people back into the workforce. We have a need to get people that are willing to pay for housing. We have an affordable housing shortage right now. There are people that want housing, but they can't get housing because of things just as simple as the certificate of need. And I'll stop there.
And I'd like to follow up and just acknowledge, I don't know who all signed up, but David Morgan worked tirelessly on this issue on the driver's license part, and I appreciate the work he put into this. You've got a letter from Todd Belcourt from Social Change. He was the one who worked with Representative Maynor on the Certificate of Good Conduct. His words are, this Second Chance Workforce Act is a well-measured bill that responds to stakeholders' needs. And look what all it does. Number one, gets people back to work. Number two, creates more business. Number three, promotes family togetherness. Number four, makes neighborhoods safer. Number five, increases self-sufficiency. Number six, breaks the cycle of generational poverty and criminal behavior. And number seven, it saves the state a lot of money. And then Americans for Prosperity Georgia, they weighed in on this bill and said the state of Georgia is stronger when people are legally able to drive, get to work, take care of their families. We do have some public transportation in Atlanta, but 86% or more of the people out there need a car to get to work in Atlanta. This bill helps those who are trying to help themselves. And Georgia has kind of a destiny and a proud history on second chances. We started as a second chance colony here where people came to live a better life. We have a strong history of that. We did some good criminal justice reform in recent years. It's been recognized nationally. Right now we've got some workforce needs, and this bill will help. Let's give people a second chance on these two issues in some small ways. Thank you.
Sure. Representative Maynor.
And one last thing, Mr. Balcour is here. He traveled here from Chicago to speak on behalf of the bill. This is a bill that is not just a new bill in Georgia. He will discuss, this is a bill that has been implemented in other states.
Thank you. And we have one question. Let me see. Tanya, is that you? Yeah. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Maynor and Representative Reeves, for your bill. I do appreciate particularly the driver's license issue. I think that will have a significant impact on folks who are trying to get to work and keep their lives together after a traffic offense. Now, I just had a couple questions about the certificate of good standing. I saw here in two questions, but I'm going to go to my second question first. I saw here that the certificate of good standing shall not prevent any judicial, and I'm on starting at lines 65, it's subsection E, and I'm focusing on line 68. Issuance of a certificate of good standing shall not prevent any judicial or administrative proceeding, any licensing authority, or any other body, board, employer, or authority from assessing or considering the eligible individual's criminal history record information. So, with that being a part of the bill, what assurance do you have that your stated desire for the bill, and that is to make sure that people can maintain housing, can maintain their jobs, can get jobs, if an employer or a housing authority can still consider their criminal history information, what is why do we believe that this certificate, which essentially with this language can be ignored by the respective stakeholders, why do we think it's going to actually do what we want it to do? And I agree with what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Representative Miller, and Representative Maynor. if I could respond to that, number one, I want to get to Todd Belcourt because I think he could expand on that a lot. But this is one step. This is not a comprehensive record sealing or anything like that. This basically gets somebody a certificate based on judicial review and confirmation that they're out of the system, they've completed their sentence, they've paid their debt to society. It gives them something to take to their job interview on Buford Highway or somewhere around Atlanta and say, look, you may see something in my past. They may have had one first offender and not be eligible for another first offender. It may be on their record. They could say, I'm done with it. That was over a year ago. I've paid all my debt to society. I'm ready to go to work. I had some problems back then that I've put behind me. Can you give me a second chance? That's what this does. So this is not a record restriction bill or anything like that. This is a certificate of good standing, and Mr. Belcourt, I think, can talk about how it's helped people around the country in states that have adopted something similar.
Well, I guess then my follow-up question would be, have we had discussions with the Georgia Chamber, with other sort of stakeholders in this about the weight that the business community...
So much for, and I'll have a follow-up question on this. Like, are there any provision in the amendment or the legislation that aim to ensure fairness and equality in the process of issuing certifications? And if they're not, would you be open to, an amendment?
You can input on that, but there are 50-something judicial circuits, and you've got a lot of Superior Court judges, and they see a lot. And I think part of this is individualized analysis on that. So the petitioner would bear the burden of showing that they meet the criteria. That's the criminal code, by the way, over there. So there are many crimes out there that don't deal with sex crimes and felony drug dealing and physical violence or gang activity. So the person can come in, show their conviction, show their sentence, get a letter from their probation officer saying they're done, and show they've met that requisite time, and go see the judge. Which right now this is creating something that will help.
And I would just add, if I can, Madam Chair, that if it's the will of the body to amend it in any ways, for example, if you wanted to go from 1 year back to 6 months, you have the ability to do that. But this is a first step. There are 4 million people that can be impacted by this right now. So this is a first step.
All right, thank you. And we have several people signed up to speak, so we're going to try to go through. Again, because we're very limited on time, I'm going to keep the comments to 3 minutes. And if you have not been in my subcommittee before, I usually do cut you off at 3 minutes. So if you can try to be as concise as possible, we do want to hear from all of you and know your opinions. But again, we want to make sure that everybody has the time to speak today on this bill. So with that being said, first one would be Brittany Hull. You can announce your name and who you're with. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Brittany Hull with Georgia Association of Manufacturers. Appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to the committee, and thank you to Chairman Reeves and Representative Maynard for bringing this bill. We represent over 130 Georgia manufacturers in Georgia, which equates to a little over 200,000 employees. And with what we're talking about with this certificate of good standing, it's very important to our members because we are looking at second chance hirings. We polled all of our members, 40% are willing and ready to bring in second chance hires. And I think with the certificate of good standing, it gives them another avenue to say, hey, I am ready for the workforce. I'm ready to be here in Georgia and do what needs to be done. As to the 1 year that was amended here recently, we obviously really like the 6 month because, as I like to say, we need cheats in the seats. We have individuals that have jobs that can't be filled now. We know that we have a lot of jobs coming in the next year to 2 years. So this is an important avenue and a great path to start getting those individuals to work. So that was my statement. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I do not see any questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is James Woodall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. James Woodall from the Southern Center for Human Rights. I won't be long. I'll be very brief. One, just wanted to take a moment to thank Chairman Reeves and Representative Maynard for this bill. It is a great sign to see that we're taking this population of people in our state very seriously. The only recommendation we have is on the point that Representative Miller raised about the use of records. And so we would just simply recommend that we strike that line to give this the teeth that it needs to really have the impact on that community. So that would be line 68 and 69 about using judicial or administrative proceedings or any other body, board, or employer authority from accessing those individuals' criminal history records. So that would be our only recommendation, but otherwise we, again, appreciate this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Sorry, I was looking at that line again, and I think we can discuss that more in detail later. Next is Todd Belcourt. And I understand you have come here from out of town. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank
If
you
you
for
can
the
announce
opportunity.
yourself and who you're with.
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity, Chairwoman Hong. My name is Todd Belcourt. To give a little more introduction on myself, I'm son of a single mother who became a minister. I'm a brother of a former drug addict. I'm a brother of multiple law enforcement officers. And I know at firsthand what it's like to be held at gunpoint, to be arrested, to couch surf, to be poor. All the things that are really implicated directly in this legislation are things that I've lived and I know. And that's why I started my nonprofit Social Change, to provide free assistance to people who are doing everything they can to overcome that grind, to break those curses, and be in a position to take care of themselves and their families. And in doing that, I've seen the pain that is on people's faces and the struggle and the frustration, and what it feels like for someone to tell me how they can't get their child anything for their birthday, what it feels like to say they can't get something for Christmas or keep food on their table, and how much pain that causes not just them, but their children and their community, their family. So what do we do then to make sure that people who are doing everything we ask of them as a society, people who have turned their lives around, pay their debts to society, but take care of their families, who go above and beyond to be involved in the community or involved in their churches or whatever, so they can be seen for who they are now? And this certificate is not new to the nation. It is new to Georgia, and it's something I've had the privilege of helping people pursue in other states. And I've seen it help people go from being homeless, from selling soap in the streets, selling real estate. People who haven't been able to find a job for 5 years to start businesses and security companies. For people who are just feeling like there's no way I'm going to be able to find a place. I mean, at least on my mother's couch for the next 30 years, to have their own apartment and to figure out the amazing power that yields. And to Representative Miller's question about, does this have an impact? Yes, those stories are important, but imagine what it feels like as someone who's dealt with all this discrimination, the shame, the stigma, to do everything that's been asked of you and still be told no everywhere you go. But imagine also how much power that means to go before a judge and have a judge that's told you nothing but negative things your whole life to say, you've done an amazing job. You have turned your life around. So much so, I'm willing to put an order in that says you are fully rehabilitated and law-abiding. That in itself is such a powerful, overwhelming moment. And to be able to present that affirmatively to employers, to occupational agents, saying, I'm different. I'm not what that says. I got a letter of recommendation from a presiding judge. And not only do I have this to speak to who I am, I'll show you the petition, talk about my journey, but most important, this gives you protection. As an employer, the reason why a lot of employers are most excited about this around the nation, because this makes certificate holders more safe to hire than people who don't have a record at all. Because it gives them negligent hiring protection when they reach out and decide to make the decision to hire people who are obviously qualified applicants. The reason why that provision is there is like, well, why do people still get to see the record? Because people who are seeking second chances aren't trying to hide things. They're just trying to say, this is who I am, this is who I was, this is who I am. And it's important that people's records restrictions, I'm a sealing proponent. I've written 20 pieces of legislation regarding it. But what I know is when something comes out from a record they think to be sealed, and employers find out later that there's something that wasn't originally reported, but the person didn't think to disclose it, but it's supposed to be restricted, the way in which that perception changes. So if people can present themselves not only honestly, but as a real asset to an individual, not just because they're qualified, because we don't want people to hire unqualified folks. That's why we don't take away discretion from employers or our occupational license agencies, but also because once you find they're qualified, not only they're qualified, they're an asset, but they have something that protects me as an employer. So not only am I getting a rock star who's qualified, but someone who's going to be a real asset. So those are some of the things that stand out that I want to highlight in response to questions, but also make myself available for questions if people have any regarding the process or the impact this has on lives, families, and communities.
Thank you. And you do have one question from Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Balfour. Did I pronounce that right?
Belcour.
Belcour. I'm
It's
so
all right.
sorry.
I've had clients for
It's been
7
a
years to
long
call me
day.
Belfour, and I respond every time. It's not a problem.
Thank you. Thank you for coming to Georgia. Thank you for your work, and thank you for your participation in this bill. I do have a couple questions for you. I noticed that this is a substitute bill, and the original bill had a very limited disqualifying sort of definition. I think it was only folks who had been convicted of sex offenses. And now this substitute bill has broadened the number of people who would not be eligible to get the certificate of good standing. And so I guess my question for you is, and I agree with everything you said, and we have a similar background, why would we keep a person who had been previously convicted of, let's say, selling marijuana, who now wants the ability to tell the world that they are a law-abiding citizen and that they want a chance to go to work and pay taxes? Why would we keep them from this process? So in other words, can you talk to me about how the decision has been made to exclude certain classes of folks who have prior convictions?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things embedded in that. They're all very important. The first is there is no desire on my behalf to, or even the people part of this legislation, to exclude people from opportunities. But there's no question that this is a bill that's extremely important, but also extremely new. So while it's important to make sure everyone has an opportunity, there are so many significant concerns from other communities and stakeholders that if it's necessary to start smaller, to make sure of the 4 million we can help 300,000 now, I'd rather do that now than wait 3 years for the perfect bill to come through. So what we've done in other states is expand legislation. It used to be for one conviction only in Illinois, for example, and then 3, and then that kind of thing. Yes, there's people. That means there's people still be languishing, being kind of quote unquote left behind in pain. But if we can't help the people right now that we can help right now, and wait in hopes, and this is something I've been pushing for 3 years in Georgia for what it's worth. So to even get to this point, it's like, oh, Jesus is real, you know. So let me start there as well. But I think it's important that we don't move forward without acknowledging the concerns of other stakeholders in the law enforcement community and others, so they can see this working and start to visualize what it would look like to open this up to people who have incredible stories, who have Saul to Paul stories, you know, who used to be maybe one of the greatest terrorizers in communities, have turned their lives around, the greatest evangelists of peace and love, and have, you know, gotten PhDs and all these things. None of these people can be considered right now, but that's just right now. So we want to make sure that the people that we can have a consideration for have an opportunity to get that, and then it'll make the case more strongly, more potently for the remainder of the population over time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you. All right, next is Jacqueline Harn.
Hello, everyone. And Madam Chairman, for brevity's sake, we are also supporting another bill that will be going through this committee, HB 909, and so I've looped in a comment of 2 of that in this testimony as well.
We can just keep it at 926 since we haven't discussed 909, if
Perfect.
that's okay with you.
That's
Thank you.
totally fine. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to speak. I've provided written testimony on this, so I'll be brief. But at Americans for Prosperity, we work to reduce unnecessary government barriers that limit people from reaching their full potential and realizing their American dream. So we support HB 926 because these policies will advance this vision. This bill will take a smart approach on crime that appropriately balances public safety with the goals of removing barriers for opportunity for those with criminal records and ensuring equal justice for all. So Dan, thank you. And I just mentioned I provided written testimony for this as well that includes some statistics about the issue. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Robert Smith. You guys are making it easy for me not to cut people off. You're doing very good. Thank you.
I feel like I just got set up.
I know. I said that on, but I'm just kidding.
I'm Robert Smith. I'm with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia. A couple of things I want to raise to you and just point out about this bill. First off, as been discussed, this body has already enacted several pieces of criminal justice reform. Specifically, I'm going to point you to 35337J, which allows for misdemeanor convictions to be sealed. And when something is sealed, that means it's not available for purposes of employment checks, housing checks. So there's already a mechanism in place that you already have at your disposal that already reaches these people that are coming forth and talking about this relief. I'm not saying that we're speaking one way or the other about the certificate. I'm just making sure this body understands you have already enacted legislation that provides some of these goals. As to the process and procedure, if I can point you to, in the substitute, line 47, and I'm going to read, such court shall maintain jurisdiction. And when we're talking about such court, we're talking about the court that had the conviction. Such court shall maintain jurisdiction over the case for this limited purpose and duration. Such petition shall be served on the prosecuting attorney. Well, when we read that, we kind of think, okay, that should be the prosecutor who handled the case for the conviction. The problem is if you go up back to line 44 and 45, it talks that the petition in the superior court in the county in which he or she resides. So that means that if you have someone who, say, in a moment of youthful indiscretion, picks up a misdemeanor theft by shoplifting while they were a student at Valdosta State, but they actually live in Gwinnett County, the conviction's in Valdosta, in Lowndes County, but they'll be filing their petition in the Superior Court of Gwinnett County. To be able to respond to this petition, which will be served on either the Solicitor General of Gwinnett County or the District Attorney of the Gwinnett Judicial Circuit, they would then have to contact the Lowndes County Solicitor General and ask him to send someone from the bottom of the state to the top of the state to respond to this petition. There's no mechanism to provide funding for that. So the Solicitor General would have to lose one of his assistants for the full day to drive up to answer this petition. So that's something I'd ask you to consider in terms of how we're going to handle this. The other thing I want to ask is the ask that this has been mentioned. The language in line 60E, which starts at 65, about the certificate and how it can be used. One of the questions and one of the concerns that's already been raised is how it can be used in another judicial proceeding. And because we're not talking about things that are sealed, and if you go into the sealing statute, 35-337, there's always a provision left behind for it to be used by Judicial Nomination Commission, prosecutors, defense attorneys. There's still an ability for us to be able to access this. No one's ever asked the question, what happens when the certificate is used offensively? Meaning that a defendant or a witness could come in and say, hey, I have the certificate of being a good person. I have the certificate, lay it down and have the court take notice of it. That's putting character evidence in. And the ask that I have, and I've submitted language and spoke to the author of this, is that could we put in a portion at the end of that line, which is currently line 73, and say something to the effect of, nor can it be used as evidence of good character in any criminal case pursuant to the provisions of Code Section Chapter 4 of Title 24. This won't affect civil cases, it only would affect criminal cases. And the reason why is a bit of fairness, in terms of, because if the defense wants to bring up good character of themselves, that's a choice they can make, but it has to be measured, and then we can respond in kind. But usually when that's through a witness talking about a general reputation, it's not about specific instances. The certificate could essentially be a way around the evidence code and allow someone, a witness, a defendant, whomever, to come in and say, hey, I've got a judicial order assigned by a judge, Superior Court judge, that says I'm a good person, and put this forward. And I'm just asking, can we balance the scale and say, if you want to do it, you can have that certificate, you just can't use it to improperly bolster yourself in a court proceeding, in a criminal court proceeding.
we have a few questions. And can I just get a clarification? And since we're on line 68, did I hear you right? We're not talking about any type of restrictions when it comes. The certificate of good standing has nothing to do with restrictions. So whether or not the conviction has been restricted or not, this is just a certificate, and so therefore, that is something that can be accessed by employers or whoever.
I'm not speaking to anything about employers. I'm staying strictly in my lane of criminal prosecutions. You know, how it's used in administrative hearings or anything like that, or hiring decisions, or decisions to allow someone for housing. I'm not talking about that. I'm specifically talking about making sure the certificate of good standing is not improperly used in a criminal proceeding.
All right, Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So don't lines 71 through 73, which will allow a court to revoke a certificate of good standing if a person is subsequently indicted, why isn't that enough to protect from the person using it offensively in a subsequent criminal prosecution?
Well, it does say maybe revoke an indictment. Doesn't, but as you are aware from your previous life, we do accuse a lot of cases too.
So could we say upon indictment or accusation for a subsequent offense, would that be sufficient to deal with the issue you raised?
They still can it will still be brought up. And the question is then what you do with a court order saying this person's a good person.
But it's also been revoked. So then the prosecution could say, yeah, but the court revoked it.
We'd have to do that. We'd have to have permission to do that, yes.
Okay. And then my second...
And because that would be balanced by the court under the 403 balancing to determine whether or not the fact that it had been revoked, if that prejudice outweighs the probative value of the issuance of the certificate.
I understand. Okay. And then my second question, really quick, Madam Chair. The other issue you raised about which prosecuting attorney is and I, in talking with folks, had sort of seen that. I guess would the fix be to just clarify that it is the county of conviction as opposed to the county of residence?
That would work.
Thank you.
I'd also point out that that this is a separate civil filing, so to be able to file this, it's going to cost a bit of money for the person who's asking for it because it's a separate civil proceeding.
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith.
All right, thank you.
Did you say 73 or 70? It was 70, right?
70,
Correct,
yes.
after 70.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we have 15 minutes, so I believe actually we have one more on this bill, and that's Mike Mitchell. Hi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Mike Mitchell. I'm with the Georgia Sheriff's Association. I will be very brief. I do want to just cover some of the provisions that are in current statute that offenders can take advantage of. We have the First Offender Act, we have conditional discharge, we have record restrictions, we seal records here in the state of Georgia, and we have various accountability courts. Based on everything that offenders here in the state of Georgia can avail themselves currently to, we just do not see the need for the certificate of good standing. In its current form, this is definitely a bill that the Sheriff's Association cannot support. I think that no other state here in the U.S. has probably done more for offenders than the state of Georgia, but we just do not see this as a good measure.
All right, thank you. And you have one question, Representative Reeves?
And Madam Chair, can I ask some follow-ups on this?
That's fine.
Mr. Mitchell, if somebody can't work and they have a lease and they breach the lease, they get evicted, right?
Yes,
And who handles evictions in Georgia?
sheriffs do.
What's the typical time to get an eviction carried out in Metro Atlanta after writ of possession is issued?
It could be several months.
Has that gotten longer in recent years?
It has.
Okay. If people are working and paying their lease and affording their apartment, doesn't that take something off the sheriff's plate?
It certainly does, but I want the committee to understand that there are a lot of provisions under Georgia law that these individuals that you're referring to could have probably taken advantage of, and probably have taken advantage of over the course of time. So by the time they reach the certificate of good standing, they have probably availed themselves to first offender, conditional discharge, and all the other provisions that exist. So this is just yet another unnecessary bite at the apple, in our opinion.
That doesn't cost sheriffs a dime. Did you talk to any sheriffs in other states where this has been in place?
I have not.
And did you talk to me before today about this?
I have not.
Okay.
However, I do want to point out for the
Or
committee,
Representative Maynor?
I do want to point out for the committee that no one reached out to us either.
All right.
Are sheriffs in this provision?
And I would like, we will speak to some other states if we know what other states have this in place. We can certainly get some feedback. In its current form, however, Representative, we cannot support this.
All right, Representative Miller.
Briefly, thank you for coming down and offering your opinion. I do have a question for you as a law enforcement person. You would agree that rehabilitation of offenders and having offenders not recidivate is a goal, a good goal of law enforcement?
I would not disagree.
Okay. And would you agree that a person who has the ability to get a job that pays a living wage, have housing, have a driver's license, have an ability to fully participate in society is less likely to reoffend than a person who does not have access to those things?
I totally agree.
Do you also agree that in Georgia, we have a significant workforce shortage? Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Okay. And so I guess my question is ultimately, all of those things that you have listed are great things, but we are still in this body tasked with figuring out ways to make sure that our citizens are able to work, not only for themselves, but for our significant, vibrant business community who wants that. You would agree that that's part of what we have to do here?
I agree.
And would you also tell us whether or not you considered all of those things in formulating your opinion today? And if you have, speak to us about why those things outweigh what you think the negatives sort of that you have articulated about this bill.
So, Representative, everything that you have mentioned there is what the state has been told to support accountability courts. That's what accountability courts do. And they do that. And they do that quite well in some people's opinion. I don't understand what the certificate of good standing necessarily does that our accountability courts are not doing. The accountability courts are holistic. They are rehabilitative, and they work on helping people get jobs. So are we saying that they're not doing that? I don't know. But I thought that's what accountability courts were supposed to do.
Representative Reeves.
Representative Mainor's from Fulton County, as well as several members of this committee. I'm from Gwinnett. Did you talk to the Fulton and Gwinnett sheriff about your opposition to this bill?
No.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else in the room that have not signed up for this bill that wants to be heard? Okay. Again, we are a little limited on time now. Chairman Smith.
Madam Chair, just more of a procedural question, and we can let our analyst about this. How long has this agenda been published on the public website for this committee hearing today and the legislation that was to be addressed?
At least 24 hours.
At least 24 hours? Okay, just clarification.
All right, thank you. So at this time, we are we have actually 3 more bills on the calendar, but we will be taking those up on Monday afternoon because of our limited time, and we will adjourn at this time. Thank you.